All right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining us today for another great NAA webinar. We've got a really unique topic and speaker today. Before we jump into introductions and handing it over to Dr. Kumar, I just want to do a little housekeeping. We keep everybody on mute, videos off during the presentation, but the chat box is open. So any questions that you might have while Dr. Kumar is presenting, put those in the chat box, and we'll answer them after the fact once we get to a Q&A session. Or hold your questions. We'll let everybody unmute after the presentation if you want to ask a question in person. So beyond that, I just want to say thanks to this month's webinar sponsor, Stone Aquatics. Dr. Carol Engel was gracious enough to sponsor this one for us. So Stone Aquatics, they are a private consultant firm specializing in providing science-based assistance to aquaculture producers on regulations, economics, and marketing issues. So yeah, please reach out to Dr. Engel anytime. Her email and phone number are right there. So we really appreciate the support. So with that, I want to introduce Dr. Ganesh Kumar, our speaker this week or this month. Dr. Kumar is an associate research professor at Mississippi State University. He has his academic beginnings in Arkansas under the guidance of Dr. Carol Engel. He's been involved with aquaculture production and market research for over 19 years now. He's based out of Stoneville, Mississippi, with his research focusing primarily on economic issues surrounding domestic aquaculture. Dr. Kumar's research is at the intersection of aquaculture production strategies, technology adoption, mathematical programming, economic impact assessment, farm management, econometrics, and risk analysis. He's one of those practical economists who bring industry and academic experience together in a really practical way. He also serves as the associate editor for several prestigious journals, including the Journal of Aquaculture Economics and Management and the Journal of the World Aquaculture Society. He has several peer-reviewed publications and extension articles concentrating on issues surrounding U.S. aquaculture production and markets. We really look forward to him presenting today on some latest research. It was a collaborative, excuse me, a collaborative effort that quantified the economic contribution of U.S. aquaculture. So with that, Dr. Kumar, we really appreciate your time and interest in presenting for us. And we really look forward to your talk today.
Thank you, Charlie. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. We sure can. If you want to just put it in presentation mode.
First of all, it's been a pleasure to be associated with U.S. Aquaculture. I really take pride in it. And this particular work is a very, very collaborative effort of several institutions together. Thanks, first of all, to NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Agencies, for funding this particular work. One of the primary objective of a large proposal that we submitted was to quantify the economic contribution of U.S. aquaculture farms. And finally, we got it materialized in last year. Before going in, first of all, it's been a great pleasure to present this in a producer platform, especially with National Aquaculture Association. These are some of the participants that are associated with this. There is plenty of the co-crime partner in this one is definitely Jonathan Van Santen. Then we have several partners from various institutions like Virginia Tech, University of Florida, Maryland, Matt Parker from Maryland, Texas State University, Purdue University, University of Alaska, Auburn, Texas A&M, USDA, ARS, and also definitely able support from Dr. Engel. And first of all, Dr. Engel and Dr. Stone, thank you for sponsoring this particular event under the NAA platform. We also have industry advices where we periodically were taking suggestions of various things, especially Ladon Swan, Terry Hansen, Andy Rupaki, and Paul Sychak from NAA in general. So I'm very glad to present those information connected with the economic contribution of U.S. aquaculture farms. As we all know that U.S. aquaculture is very, very diversified. We have more than 1,500 species being cultured within almost all the states except one or two states that don't have aquaculture farms in general, or aquaculture is banned in general. About 1,500 species is not, no kidding. Definitely, there are a few major players like catfish and trout, but at the same time, most of the farms, about over 75% of the farms are small and medium size in business. That means the revenue that they generated is it's smaller or medium in scale. So given the diversity of aquaculture in terms of species as well as the production system, the underlying economic spending patterns are all very, very diversified and very, very complex in nature, and it becomes very difficult to quantify them in general. So we had that difficulty in general, but uh, given that we were bestowed with several researchers who were really looking at farm level economics, we could accomplish this work using primary farm data, or primary expenditure data is collected from industry within the farms. So if you look at aquaculture farms, they are interconnected with multiple industries within the economy, right? For example, if we just take the finfish industry, that is heavily dependent on feed industries, right? The feed industries is connected with grains and several of other industries, manufacturing industries. Fingerling is another important input that comes in from aqua farms. They buy in from the hatcheries, and capital procurement from banks and all those things are very important. So several other inputs are being used on farms, and because of that, each of these aquaculture farms are actually connected within the economy. Within the economy. So economic impact assessment is a very advanced, very solidified way of quantifying the economic connections of an industry to the other industries within the economy, and quantifying those measures or economic measures. We always hear economic impact or economic contribution as a ripple effect, right? I mean, we always hear that economic spending has multiple ripple effects in the economy. So politicians or policymakers are always looking for this kind of assessments. So typically what happens is we can kind of exemplify this thing as a stone being thrown into a pond. The direct impact is because of the stone. It creates ripple effects within the pond. And within those ripples, the ripples will backlash from the ponds also. So there will be multiple impacts going on within the pond. And quantifying that together is called as the economic impact assessment. The first one is the direct revenue that actually an industry contributes. In this particular example, the direct impact is the revenue generated by the aquaculture farms. That means the amount of money or the amount of sales that they generate. That is called as the direct impact. The indirect impact is nothing but the spending patterns or the cost coefficients that the farms generate. For example, the industries that are directly connected to it, right? The feed industry, the hatchery industries, or the fingerling industries, the electricity, banks, those, the spending pattern is actually quantified through the indirect impact. The induced impact is nothing but the expenditure patterns from the household or the labor that are associated with both the primary industry of our concern as well as the industries that they are connected with. So all the household expenditure is compiled together as the induced impact. So when we put together this direct, indirect, and induced impact, we get the total economic impact. There are different ways to kill the cat, but we need data for it. And we were very particular about that we are quantifying the farm effect. There are close to about 5,000 to 6,000 farms across in the United States who are producing fish or farm-raised fish and mollusk and other various species. So we are measuring only the economic impact or the economic contribution of those farms. So the supply chain elements or the actors within a supply chain are not quantified. For example, the feed mill, the processors, and other market supply chain actors. So we are looking at the ripple effects created by the farms or aquaculture farms in the United States. We went ahead with Implan. Implan is a commercial database that collects data from multiple economic sectors. They have about 546 economic sectors, of which aquaculture is not an important play. So we need to create our own niche and spending patterns of all these things. So we went ahead with a process called as analysis by part approach. So wherein we are niching an aquaculture component and trying to figure out the economic impact assessment. So the first and the most comprehensive, I won't say that the first one, but the most comprehensive effort as to date was quantifying the economic contribution of the US catfish industry in general. So catfish industry has multiple components, not only farms. So we had very, very good data as far as US catfish industry was concerned. In 2019, we started this effort and we published those papers published a paper in 2021 quantifying the economic contribution of farms, feed mills, and processors put together. We call that as the US catfish industry, and that was the impact in 2019 was about $1.9 billion. And the jobs that were created by the industry was about 9,100 jobs. So that was one of the most comprehensive work as of date before this work. So economic contribution of US aquaculture farms, once again, this is a farm level effect, right? And the revenue generated by the farms is called as the direct effect. The indirect effect is mainly the spending patterns that are associated with the farms, purchase input quantities that are being purchased by the US aquaculture farms, quantify the indirect effect, while the induced effect is the sum total of all the household expenditures associated with all the industries that are connected with the primary income. So there are other components in an economic impact assessment. We call them as the labor income, that is the effect of labor expenditure. Then value addition. Value addition is nothing but a combination of labor income and taxes, and also property income. If there is other property incomes coming that from aquaculture farms, we can quantify them. So we can quantify and separate this thing into jobs as well as tax revenues also. So we used very latest primary farm data, expenditure patterns from multiple species and sectors. So we were very proud of that, because it's not an easy job, because it really takes a lot of laborious activities as well as trust of the farms to disclose all these numbers. So we were very fortunate, and it's not a single grant that supported, it's multiple grants that supported this previous works of collecting the expenditure patterns from US aquaculture farms. As I said, aquaculture in the United States is quite diversified. We can quantify them into major 5 or 6 groups. One is the food fish sector, which is dominated by some major players like catfish and trout. Mollusk sectors, which include oysters and clams and mussels. Crustacean sector, really dominated by the Louisiana crawfish industry. Bait fish, sport fish, ornamental and recreational trout sector, recreational species sectors can be combined into one particular sector in general. And also there are miscellaneous species like alligators and turtles and eels and all those miscellaneous species that are not typically called as prominent species can also be grouped into a species. The reason for this kind of grouping is to make sure that none of these industries, some of the industries that are very small and very localized, the impact is not disclosed, because it can hurt those industries that are very small in general. Even in the census, if you look at US aquaculture census, you can say them that as aggregated together. So our idea was to quantify this economic contribution of US aquaculture into 4 or 5 categories. We also wanted to see the impact of freshwater and marine sectors. It's always been a debate where the policymakers should spend their money or invest their money in general. So freshwater and marine sectors were also separately quantified, or the economic contributions were separately quantified. We are very proud of our surveys because this is surveys takes a lot of effort in terms of human activities as well as time in general, and it needs to be done very, very patiently. It really started way back in 2012 with Jonathan Van Santen doing baitfish and sportfish surveys all across the country. The response rate were 34%, and the national coverage is about 74. That means we were able to account for about 75% of the baitfish and sportfish industry sales across the United States. So similarly, we do have expenditure level data from salmonid sector, the entire shellfish sector, tropical ornamental fish, catfish, hybrid striped bass, tilapia, redfish, and a few other species that are very, very, very specific in nature. So look at the response rate and coverage rate. Coverage rates are very, very high. The response rate ranged from about 6% to 89%, while the coverage rate ranged from 31% to even 99%. So it's a very comprehensive primary level information that we were able to achieve, and it really because of multiple people who are involved in this particular research group and research team. So primary data and expenditure and revenue patterns were collected from catfish, trout, salmon, hybrid striped bass, tilapia, redfish, sturgeon, and major other finfish species, while the entire shellfish industry, both on the East Coast as well as on the West Coast, were able to be quantified. Sportfish, baitfish, tropical ornamental, recreational trout, that's a separate sector in general, and also crustacean sector, which is dominated by crawfish and shrimp. We have alligators, turtles, eels, seaweed, and caviar industry in the miscellaneous sector too. So primary information were collected from all these sectors in general. Let's come back to the results, the contribution of U.S. aquaculture farms, right? So for example, as I told, there is direct, indirect, and induced effect. So what does this table show is that there are about 15,000 direct jobs created in U.S. aquaculture farms. That 15,730 jobs that are created are actually, sorry. What happened, Charlie, over here?
We can still see your slide on our side.
Okay. I'm unable to see my screen. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, sorry about that. I clicked on something and lost the screen. But the direct jobs, direct 15,730 jobs that are directly employed on farms are actually generating 22,409 jobs in the economy in total. Partially because of the spending patterns or the buying patterns that the U.S. aquaculture farms are having, and also because of the spending created by the employees that are either directly or indirectly connected with the sector. So the total jobs that are created by U.S. aquaculture farms are about 22,409%. The total labor income that is generated is about close to about $1 billion. And the value addition is nothing but the labor income plus the taxes and property income that are put together. That's about $2.5 billion. And the economic contribution of U.S. aquaculture farms are close to about $4 billion or $3.8 billion to be precise. The multiplier effect is it's a multiplier effect. So, for example, if $1 is actually spent on or if $1 is actually generated on aquaculture farms, the total impact on the economy is about 1.73. That means an additional 73 cents are being generated within the economy. That's the meaning of it. So the take home from this particular slide is the $3.8 billion as well as the 23,000 jobs that are created. So if you break up the sector in general, about 43% of the contribution is coming in from the food fish sector. We all know that there are some major players like catfish, trout, redfish, and tilapia in there that's contributing about 43%. 22% is actually contributed by the mollusk sector. 16% is because of the bait fish, sport fish, ornamental and recreational species put together. Crustaceans are not small, but about 13%. There are not many major players other than crayfish, Louisiana crayfish industry in there. It's contributing about 13% of this $3.8 billion. And other miscellaneous species are contributing about 6%. So if you look at the Implan also allows us to look at the various industries that are impacted by the output from U.S. aquaculture. The most important one is definitely the feed sector in general. The animal feed manufacturing sector is impacted, or about $587 million is being generated within that particular sector. Then the aquaculture production sector, that is the hatcheries and all the other farms, are also impacted by another $200 million in general. Banks are an important contributor. That is the non-depository credit intermediation and related activities. That's nothing but banks and banks-related activities. That's create about $169 million in impact. Similarly, gasoline stores, and farms require both petrol and diesel in general. It creates about $110 million within that particular sector. And real estate is another very important sector, because people who are employed in this sector, as well as people who are employed because of this sector, in other sectors, are also living in households or in rented or in own houses, so that real estate impact is also pretty much high. All of them are more than $100 million in general. So in total, there were 525 sectors out of the 546 sectors in Implan is affected or influenced by U.S. aquaculture farms. That's a pretty big number. That's 96% of the economy is actually converted or connected with U.S. aquaculture farms. For a simple fact about how we separate direct, indirect, and induced effect is just look at hospitals, right? There is no direct purchase of inputs from the aquaculture farms from hospitals. Definitely, but people who are employed down there are actually getting service from the hospitals, and because of that, about $38 million is being spent there. So that's the way of interpreting all these things. So, but we can see that about 525 sectors of the 546 sectors analyzed by Implan is actually influenced or impacted by U.S. aquaculture farms. Most of the jobs are created unilaterally across the industry. It's no one particular sector, but the 23,000 jobs are created within the 526. That means about 96% of the U.S. economy is actually creating jobs just because of U.S. aquaculture in general. Labor income, as I said, labor income is actually employee compensation and proprietary income together, right? The profit as well as the portion which is going to the laborers put together. That's a very big number, close to about $1 billion in impact in general. Most of that is going into the housing and real estate sector in the economy. Value addition is nothing but labor income put together and all the other taxes and incomes generated from properties put together. We call them as a value addition. That's additional value that is generated because of the spendings that are happening in the US aquaculture sector is about $2.5 billion. Once again, it is mostly going into the real estate market where people are staying, either in rented or own homes. Banks are also an important value-added sector within U.S. aquaculture. So taxes, that's another important bifurcations that are coming because of any business in an economy. That's why policymakers always want to see how much tax revenues are generated, both at local level as well as local, regional, and federal level. US aquaculture farms are generating close to about $193 million in general because of their revenue activities and spending activities. At federal level is the highest. It's about $114 million, while at state level, it's about $46 million, and local county or regional level, it's about $33 million in general. So Uncle Sam should be pretty happy with the US aquaculture farm activities. If you separate, I also wanted we decided collectively to separate this contribution into different sectors. One of the major sector is the food fish production sector. The food fish production sector was contributing about 1.7 billion and generating close to about 9,600 jobs. Mostly the dominant players like catfish, trout, tilapia, hybrid striped bass, redfish are the ones that are contributing to this huge economic activity of $1.7 billion. The mollusk farms are also important. Among the marine sector, mollusk farms are the most dominant ones. The total economic impact from mollusk farms was close to about $0.84 billion. The employment generated was about 5,100 jobs. Oysters, clams, and mussels, both at the east and the west coast and Gulf Coast industries, were the major contributor to this. So the mollusks were contributing close to about $0.8 billion. We all know that the oyster industry is one of the fastest growing sector within the United States. Crustacean farms, this is hugely underreported in the census, predominantly because of crawfish sales being underreported in Louisiana industry. The total economic impact was about the direct impact or the direct revenue generated from this sector was about $274 million, which was actually creating an impact close to about two. That is, the multiplier effect is about 2, and the total impact is about $540 million within the economy, creating another 3,100 jobs also. Once again, crawfish was the predominant sector within these crustacean farms. Bait fish, sport fish, ornamental, and recreational farms were clubbed together just because we didn't want to disaggregate and create issues for one particular sector, because some sectors are very much localized in a particular state and particular county. So we were very cautious about that. Privacy and confidentiality of the data is very important to anybody, especially the economist. So we combined together this sport, bait, ornamental, and recreational farms, which were generating almost $500 million in impact in general and 3,100 jobs in general. So bait fish industry in Arkansas, the sport fish industry across the United States, ornamental finfish industry or ornamental trade within Florida, and recreational trout in Idaho, as well as in North Carolina and South Carolina, and also in Tennessee. All those regions were put together and found the economic impact as about $500 million. Miscellaneous species is funny. None of them are, some of them cannot be even called as fish or remotely even fish or invertebrates, but alligators, turtles, which are both reptiles. Eel is another fish, but seaweed and algae and all the miscellaneous put together generate about $250 million in economic impact and about 1,000 to 1,300 jobs in general. So it's an important sector in general, even though they are very scattered across United States or very specifically in one or two states. So we combined them together and found out that their impact is about $250 million in general. We also aggregated all this information into freshwater and marine component. We were very careful about how we aggregate them. For example, catfish and trout will be falling in freshwater, while almost all of the oyster and clam industry will be falling in the marine sector. So we have to do some very good exercise thanks to Shraddha. She was very cautious in managing all those things and finding out and separating the huge multiple species into freshwater and marine sectors, thus finding that the freshwater farms are contributing about 2.6 billion in economic impact, while the marine component was about $1.12 billion in economic impact. The taxes generated by the freshwater sector was about $128 billion, while the marine sector was about $65 million in general. As I said, the direct impact is what we are collecting as the revenue component, and because of that, there is induced and indirect effect. The indirect effect was much higher for the food fish sector, but when we look at the induced effect, we can see that the mollusk and the crustaceans are coming very closer to the food fish sector in general. The multiplier effect is something that general folks look for. How much is the impact within the general within the economy because of one particular sector? We didn't see much of a difference between these 5 sectors in terms of their output multiplier or employment multiplier in general. But we typically saw that crustaceans have a little bit higher output multiplier and employment multiplier, predominantly because the expenditure in this sector was much higher than the other sectors, for example, like food fish or mollusk, because the ingredients that are used or the technicians that are used are more expensive. The techniques that are used are indoor. So in many of these cases, those expenditure patterns were a bit more expensive, and implant does not recognize whether it is the sector is at loss or gain. In this particular case, the shrimp sector was many times bleeding money, and that's why the multiplier effect was slightly higher for crustaceans compared to food fish or mollusk. When we talk about the economic contribution of U.S. aquaculture farms, we all know that we need to talk about the elephant in the room. And there is no doubt that regulations is the economic losses because of regulations is the biggest sitting elephant in the room. And the scientists associated with this particular group or particular project was also able to quantify the regulatory impact of U.S. aquaculture in general. Dr. Engel led this series, then Jonathan took over it, and we found out that about $500 million is just the effect of lost revenue from various aquaculture surveys that we did. Our surveys, I already showed multiple species and multiple sectors put together is about 506 million quantified. The lost revenue from regulations in U.S. aquaculture is about $506 million. If we find out the economic impact of this particular lost revenue, it alone represents about $877 million, and a foregone jobs of close to about 3,700 jobs annually. So these are annual numbers that are lost, or it's not being there because of regulations. So it's an important thing that is baffling researchers in general, especially people from outside. A person like me who is coming from India, and countries like India and China are actually supporting aquaculture, while the regulatory environment in the United States is one of the single most factor that is not allowing the aquaculture industry, or a country that is bestowed with all the natural resources and the technical and the techno-economic environment being so good in this country, not being able to completely utilize that. Regulations are the number one uh, impacting reason for that. So in conclusion, I just wanted to put together in one particular slide, the total economic contribution of aquaculture farms in the United States is close to about $4 billion. It generates about 23,000 jobs annually. The labor income is close to about $1 billion, and the value addition is about $2.5 billion. The economic multipliers is about 2. That means every dollar that is generated replicates another dollar within the economy. The sector, even though aquaculture is agriculture and it is a smaller sector of the agriculture, it impacts multiple sectors. Close to about 96% of the economic sectors are influenced by US aquaculture farms. Among those sectors, 185 sectors, economic sectors within the implant sector was having an effect of more than $1 million per year from US aquaculture farms. The most important thing that I really wanted to specify that the jobs that are created, the 23,000 jobs, most of them are created within the rural region or rural part of the country. And rural jobs to any policymaker is much more important. The revenue that is generated, the revenue that is spent within a rural region is supporting much more than in an urban region. And it's very impactful for the economic development of any particular country. Food fish sector is definitely the major player. Major players like catfish, trout, tilapia, salmon, it's all are playing a major sector. And the next one is the mollusk industry dominated by oyster. Inland sector is contributing 2.5 times or more than the marine sector. The potential is very high in the marine sector because of existence of high valued species. So policy environment needs to be strengthened to improve the marine sector development within the United States. And regulatory burden, especially on the farm level regulatory burden, it's an important contributor that is actually stifling the US aquaculture growth. So how can we support US aquaculture farms? As I said, all this kind of scientific studies that are showing that the economic activity generated, that's the $4 billion that is generated, is mostly generated within those rural economy. That's very important. So we need to support US aquaculture farms. Streamlined and supportive regulatory environment is an important thing. In many countries like Norway, there is streamlining of regulatory policies and actions being taken care. In this particular country, there is close to about 1,500 laws that are governing US aquaculture or aquaculture farms in general. So we need to definitely avoid the redundant regulatory laws, as well as streamlining of many of these things put together can improve the situation of growth for aquaculture sector. Policy support at not only at national, at state and local levels are also important. And this all put together can actually reduce the seafood trade deficit. It's a record number. In 2022, it's about $20 billion in trade deficit. So it's important that we reduce this dependency on imports. And the first step is by eating and looking for US produced seafood. Here is a link to our paper. Once again, I really want to thank all my co-authors and collaborators and students who are working with this particular project. It's a huge collaborative effort, and thanks to the funding agencies as well as NAA to give me a chance to talk about this one. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Kumar. I mean, that was really great. I reviewed the paper as it came out, but it's really nice to see it in a webinar format that's easy to digest and just excellent. So we really appreciate the time in this. The both the regulatory impact studies that have come out and this, capstone type economic research, this type of scientific information is so foundational and important to, moving the needle for aquaculture. And yeah, we just really appreciate the work you and this whole team of folks have done to put this in, and we'll hopefully be able to use it in the future to help move the industry forward as we know it needs to. So folks, if you want to raise your hand, I'll be able to unmute you if you want to ask questions, and then otherwise just stick it in the chat box. And we've got one question already, so I'll read it off to you. Is the regulatory burden including the overall cost to meet local and federal permitting, or the limits of farm growth due to permitting barriers?
I can say something about the permitting barriers in general. When we looked at multiple surveys across the United States pertaining to regulatory impact, that the cost of the permits were very meager. It's not the cost of the permits, it's the real barriers that are created because of the permits. For example, one producer or two producers said that they have to wait for 1.5 to 2.5 years to just get through the review process within the permit. So any investor, that is a lost opportunity in general. So those kinds of effect has more issues rather than the direct cost of permitting. In many of the surveys that we have done, the cost of permits were much lower. I mean, it's less than 1% or less than 2% at the max of the total regulatory burden in general. But it's the opportunity cost of or lost revenues because of waiting and going through multiple things to get those permit that is actually costing us.
Um, Maybe this is just a follow-up statement here. The cost of regulations could be converted into a common base year, example 2024, using an appropriate deflator.
We are actually trying to put together another paper that is just Dr. Engel is leading that effort. It's a monumental effort because all the studies were done in the last 5 years, right? So all those things are compiled together, and a review paper of all the studies, regulatory burden in general, is actually being going to be published in 2025 for sure.
Okay. All right, folks. So we still have time for questions. Don't be shy. So, this isn't a super relevant one, but I was just curious. You showed, around 2 billion for other industries. There were 509, I think, of those listed. What were some of the ones that stood out to you, or maybe even some that were surprising?
I mean, definitely the feed industry, the feed manufacturing, animal feed manufacturing sector is the biggest impacted impacted industry because of aquaculture, right? Because feed is such an expensive input wherever feed is used. Real estate industry, I mean, or real estate sector is very important, right? We don't think like that. But people who are working within the sector or people who are employed because of US aquaculture farms are actually are living in those rented apartments or own homes. So that's how real estate sector comes into picture. So sectors that are not typically thought about are actually being impacted by US aquaculture industry.
Mhm.
Most important thing to me is the rural impact. I wish I can really separate it out from an urban impact versus rural impact, but implant does not allow us to do that. We don't have a segregation of that. But many of this, when we look at all the surveys and when we look at all the responses coming in, I mean, many of them are in rural counties. I mean, many of these aquaculture farms, almost more than 90% of them are in rural counties. It's not in cities, right? So those revenue generated as well as the impact generated and the jobs created by aquaculture farms are actually in those rural areas, and that's very, very important to know that. Yeah.
See, can we chat about new technologies? Oh, hold on one second. new technologies like RAS or and how we plan for commercialization?
Uh, we looked into it. There is multiple studies showing that what is the profitability within the RAS and all, but the production that is coming in from RAS at United States aquaculture uh, level is much smaller as of right now. Implant or economic impact assessments are done on an annual basis, right? I mean, we didn't do it for several reasons for several years. I think this is the most comprehensive study that ever done. So we can only see that effect in the next 10 years. The hue and cry for RAS is well understood, but the profitability part is what is going to govern in the long run. Whether those systems are able to produce consistently larger amount of fish to break even all the cost because of the input purchase and the technicality associated with RAS is the most important factor that is going to uh, make it or break it. Yeah.
Yes. I think Dr. Engel just had a clarification on the regulatory cost burden that was calculated as well as lost revenue, but these two were not added together because the
Yeah.
cost and revenue were distinct. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So we were only talking about just the lost revenue part, right? I mean, so that's important. The cost is completely different. Cost is the actual incurrence because of regulatory burden. The farmers are actually incorporating cost. In matured, established industries like trout and catfish, the cost is going to be higher. But in marine sectors where there is permitting issues and in public waters, those issues, their lost revenues are going to be much higher.
Okay. Amy, you should have a button there to unmute.
Go ahead, Amy.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
So I'm just curious. The study is looking at surveys that have taken place over 5+ years.
Mhm.
And my question is, do you think that the US aquaculture industry is stable and hasn't really grown or declined so that the numbers collected 5 years ago are still representative of the numbers that would be today in those different sectors? And my second question is for Charlie, which is what is the NAA? Do you guys have a plan on elevating some of this information so it gets to Washington?
I can answer the first part for sure. Amy, I mean, though we said that this data were collected across 5 years, we have made adequate economic tools into it. For example, if some of those factors needs to be inflated to the prices, especially during 2020, 2021, many of these factors, many of the input factors have gone up, right? So we have accounted for all those input factors in the worst case just by using an inflation factor, and in many cases using the current values in general. So almost all the inputs were taken to 2022 numbers before doing the numbers. So this is the economic impact or the economic contribution of US aquaculture farms as of 2022, not 2024.
And yeah, Amy, just to follow up. So yes, we continuously kind of use all this type of economic research that's out there. I'm scared I don't want to pull up right now, but if you go to nationalaquaculture.org, there's an advocacy tab, and within that you'll see a regulatory impact webpage that we built out that kind of includes a lot of the regulatory type assessments. So we carry that message forward as much as possible in all of our public outreach efforts and meeting with Congress directly. So it's kind of what I was touching on before. Foundational scientific information like this is so critical for us to glean the top level information out of it and then use it for all of our advocacy efforts moving forward because it's verifiable and reputable coming from economists. So We absolutely do that. And, this new kind of capstone paper is another exciting thing. We were just chatting before the webinar started about how we can kind of make a nice infographic out of this research specifically and really get that out there as well. Because, yeah, this type of information is so valuable to us as a farming community to speak at a local or a federal level about the impacts and positive benefits of aquaculture and justify, different asks for our advocacy topics where we know we need to move the needle in the right direction. So hopefully, I'd like to say, we'll put out another infographic soon. But yeah, please do check out our nationalaquaculture.org, our advocacy section, and that regulatory burden webpage. And everyone on here, feel free to use this information for your efforts at a local level too when you're communicating about aquaculture. Let me see. Sorry, I'm scanning down through here. We got a couple more. I want to miss one. Do plants grown hydroponically count under the aquaculture product U.S. standards definition?
I don't know about the hydroponics part of it, but plants grown under aquaponics should be counted as aquaculture. Byproducts of aquaculture, definitely, and especially in economic impact assessment, that should be there. But we did not see any indoor or RAS or hydroponic plants being generated within the data set, within the US Census data set. These are all things that are going to come up later in the censuses, probably in the next census. There may be some generation. If there is sufficient amount of those products coming in, I think they are very meager amount that is coming in right now. But seaweed was included in it. Seaweed and algae that are produced and recorded by USDA NAS is actually included in this one.
Okay, let's see. The next one we have, I think, is what is the demographic of U.S. aquaculture producers?
I don't have that information. Hopefully, I don't know whether the census does collect all those things. The ethnicity and the demographic part of that is not something that I looked over in this particular project, because this is mostly an economic multiplier calculation and macroeconomic computation of contribution.
Let's see. We had someone, Benedict said there's no published data on demographics.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. And I wasn't sure either whether the census included it in there. So, well, folks, we still have time for a few more questions. Let's, if anyone has any other lingerings, let's see. Do you see greater use of mechanization affecting the contribution of U.S. aquaculture, meaning efficiencies, higher value jobs?
Definitely. One of the things that surprising, I mean, Charlie asked this question, what are some of the surprising elements that are, or surprising industries that are seen to be impacted by aquaculture, right? I mean, machineries and operating and workshops, machinery, repair shops are something that are directly very much connected with aquaculture sector, just like any other agriculture sector. If you look at contributions of any other agriculture sector, you will see that mechanized components are very much a key input. And we also saw that very much, especially in pond-raised aquaculture sectors, especially the food fish sector. We know that 4 or 5 years ago, when we did the catfish industry, we were really surprised by the amount of money that catfish farmers were spending on mechanized needs, repair needs. So it's pretty much the same across the sectors. So the more reliant you are on mechanized sectors, the impact also will be higher in this. Dr. Engel had an important addition to what Amy's question was, I mean, whether it is adjusted for inflation or not. Yeah, the cost structure is very, very important to understand. The cost structure was the one that is most important for us. Its revenue was easy to collect for each of these sectors, but the cost structures, that means the spending patterns, so the spending patterns, the structure of that remains almost the same unless something drastically change. So inflationary adjustments for those cost elements can be easily made for at least a few more years, for definitely. And that's why this multiplier, the multiplier quantified from this particular study will stand for some more time for sure, unless something drastically changes in the next 5 years.
Okay. So we have one more question. How would a RAS expert with 10 plus years of experience in design and construction find meaningful long-term employment?
Paul, that's a difficult question for me to answer. One of the things that we are economists, right? We looked into labor inputs of different production systems across the United States. For example, RAS versus ponds versus cage culture versus raceways. We found out that the RAS employees or RAS labor is a high-tech labor, right? I mean, it's not like a $10 farm labor employed in the South. So of course, those salaries are going to be very different, and that's one of the major reason why the profitability in the RAS was comparatively lower compared to pond aquaculture systems in general.
And Paul, I'll add to just the National Aquaculture Association. We do offer candidate profiles. So if you want to shoot me an email with your resume, CV, I'm happy to blast that out there to our members. That's kind of a free service we offer, to try to help do that matchmaking and find you a farm that may be hiring. So shoot me an email. We're happy to put you on that candidate profile list. Anyone that's looking for work in U.S. aquaculture. So.
Another question from Paul. I mean, Paul has been pretty active. I think it's about the outlook of offshore aquaculture in the United States. Yeah, I hope the outlook and the performance improves definitely because it's policy level changes that are needed definitely with aquaculture opportunity areas being identified and real actions being acting in the open ocean. One of the major reasons, if you look at regulatory reviews, one of the major reasons why inland aquaculture in the United States is 2.5 or 3 times better than in production and economic contribution than the marine sector is predominantly because of this regulatory environment in general.
Mm-hmm. Well, with just a few minutes left, I guess I'd be remiss if we didn't mention the census is coming out just in a few weeks. The new census of aquaculture. Just we were chatting a little bit. Could you tell us how you feel the new census is going to compare to the economic contribution paper you just went over today in terms of data and response rates?
I don't know about the response rate, Charlie. I mean, the biggest issue with any scientifically conducted surveys is definitely going to be the response rate. Coverage rates can be adjusted for sure, but typically NAS has lower response rate. I hope that this year or this time they get better response rate. The initial numbers that we are seeing from census of agriculture is about $2.3 billion, and which is very, very close to the numbers, the conservative numbers that we put together. It's our numbers are 2.2 billion. So I won't say that it is much farther from the census of agriculture. Census of aquaculture will come. There may be some corrections added to it. So we just have to wait for December 14th for sure.
All right. Well, mark your calendars, everyone, December 14th. So, well, I really appreciate everybody's attention today and participating in the NA webinar. And of course, Dr. Kumar, for your expertise and for presenting this impressive work. The last thing I was just going to touch on is just our next webinar will be on December 6th. For those that are looking for that next announcement, it'll be coming out later this week. We'll be presenting on marine energy opportunities in aquaculture. So a little bit of a different topic for next one. So if you enjoy these webinars, please tell your friends and colleagues about it. These are a free service the National Aquaculture Association offers. And of course, we really, we're a member-driven organization. We would love to have you, if you're a farmer or supplier, join as a voting member of NAA. And we also offer a public service affiliate membership for any of our .gov or .edu friends that are on the call as well. So we're kind of your one-stop national association trying to bring together the aquaculture community. And we appreciate your attention today and your support for all the efforts we're doing. So I hope everyone has a great rest of their week, and we'll see you on the next NAA webinar in December. All right.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you.